So at this point in time, I would like to invite Blessya Hartz, Coco Sho-Nell, Juan Pablo, and Nancy Good.
All right, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Drag as Spiritual Healing. My name is Blessya Hartz. I hail from Oakland, California, by way of Dallas, Texas, and I am so glad to be here in the Chai. Did I say that right? I've been practicing that for a long time.
That was good. The Chi. Welcome to Chi-Town.
I'm so glad to be here with all of you. We want to extend a warm welcome to our attendees, those of you who are here in person, those of you who are viewing us virtually. We're so glad that you are here. Following our panel, there will be a time for questions for the panelists and comments. And for those of you who are joining us online, please type your questions in the chat at any point, and we will try to do our best to get to them. We encourage everyone to participate fully. As we get started, we do have a bit of a content trigger warning. This panel may contain conversations about religious trauma, emotional abuse, homophobia, and femphobia. Okay, so with those in the room, know that if at any point you're having feelings, feel free to get up and move around or leave the room. One of our spiritual care chaplains, John Red, is over. John, will you raise your hand? And okay.
Al and Rebel are our spiritual care providers for this session.
Gotcha. I didn't get that note. So just reach out to her, and she will companion you if you need a little help during this time. And also Rebel. Great. Will you wave to the group so everybody can see you? Thank you so much. So I did my makeup, most of it myself today.
Good job.
Some of you may be wondering about those eyebrows, but I kind of had to do most of it by myself because my drag mother, well, you know, I'm from the South, and she said something like, you know, it's time to push you out of the nest and see if you'll fly. And so here I am, but I say that by way of taking just a moment to appreciate my drag mom, Bonnie Violet, who has worked on this, who's dreamed of this, who has planned for this day for a long time. So could we appreciate her for all her hard work in bringing this important event to the world, the first of its kind ever in the world, Drag and Spirituality Summit. So with that said, I just have a bit of an introduction. So many folks, as you too may have experienced, regardless of our gender identity, regardless of how our sexual orientation, have experienced some trauma, which has led to internalized spiritual shame that is provoked by toxic theologies and cultural mores related to what I would say misunderstandings of gender. So for many of us who practice the art of drag is a spiritual practice and can lead to not only spiritual healing, but liberation from shame, misogyny, and internalized homophobia, just to name a few. And so in this session, we invite our panelists who are, hey Nancy, what's up? Coco Sho-Nell and our friend Juan Pablo, to share how drag has helped them find healing and liberation. So first, I would like to invite each of you just to give your best 4 minutes about how you have experienced, how you practice drag and how you have experienced spiritual trauma, whatever you're comfortable in sharing just by way of introduction. Who wants to go first?
I'll go. So hi everyone, I'm Coco Sho-Nell. You know, we're spelled phonetically so I don't get sued. And well, the thing one for me is because I grew up in on the south side of Chicago originally. So my mom is Baptist, my dad is Catholic, and I'm a Buddhist. Yeah, so that's fun in the household. But I came to Buddhism because I didn't feel accepted or right in the Catholic Church because I went to Catholic school and I actually was sequestered to go to for free college and high school because I scored very high in like the aptitude test. So when I was like going to high school and things like that, I didn't want to go to Catholic high school because I just didn't feel that was the right thing for me. So my parents never really like forced me to say, you have to believe in this. They were always like, find your path. Find out, as long as you believe in something, that's all that we care about. So I went on a major journey. I studied like earthy religions more. So I was a solitary Wiccan for 7 years. I went on a journey of like practicing voodoo because I wanted to get more connected to the earth and learning the true history of that. Because that's something that people don't talk about. But the movies are like, oh, it's all demonic stuff. No, it's actually more earth, connected to earth and healing. So people don't know about that. So do your research. But when I found Buddhism, which was June 5th, 2004, 654, number person, I felt like that finally fit for me. And that kind of helped me open up a lot of things for myself. Because I did do drag in 1999. That was the first time I did drag. I'm like, I know, I don't look that old. Not a stitch of makeup on. But that was the first time I did drag, but I was still scared of it because there was this stigma of like, if you do drag, it was like, oh, you're less than. There was always this idea of like, okay, being gay is one step down, and then doing drag is another step down from being human. And that's something that really bothered me. That's why I was always afraid to even do it or try to do it. But like in like 6x4, that was like the turning point for me. That I was like, oh, I can just do whatever I want. If this makes me happy, then why don't I just try to do it and be happy? So I started doing drag in plays and musicals. And then I decided to join the nightlife scene and become Coco Sho-Nell in 2009, officially. And I just found so much peace and joy in becoming a drag entertainer and connecting with people. There's something about when you perform a song and you connect with people in the audience, it's like a different plane. And I tell people that all the time. It's such this amazing feeling that you connect with people and you just can really bring back emotions for people. Perfect example, I did a Studio 54 show and there was someone in the audience and they came up to me after the show and they said, I saw Sylvester for the first time at Studio 54 and you did a Sylvester song. You brought me back to one of the happiest moments in my life. And all my friends, unfortunately, are gone. And you brought such joy to me from just doing that number.
So I want to come back to that story in a little bit when we talk about how drag might help other folks encounter some spiritual healing. Juan Pablo, would you like to share a little bit about perhaps how you've experienced spiritual trauma?
Sure. I came out at 17 years old. I came out at 17 years old, and that wasn't going to work. We were a very religious family, and so that started being a process of conversion therapy over and over again, until about 5 years ago that I decided to walk in my authentic self. There weren't very many people in the Latino community that I could look towards. I didn't know any gay Christians, first of all. I still connected with the thoughts of Christianity and the practices, and found Urban Village Church, and that has been wonderful. At 19, I dated a drag queen, and worked at, I know, underage, but I worked at a place that had drag shows here in the 80s, 10 years before you.
That's fine.
And but then our church had a drag worship, and Coco Sho-Nell was there. Also helped me find someone that wasn't Christian. We had Christian, non-Christian, different faiths, different beliefs, all together, and it made me realize that we're here together. It's a collective, and that drag is not an individual thing. It's a collective art form for all of us. And so,
yeah, let's talk more about that too later. Hey, Nancy, talk to us a little bit about how you've experienced spiritual trauma in your performance of drag.
Oh, yes, absolutely. First of all, hi. Can you hear me?
Just a second, Nancy.
Oh. Am I?
Yeah, let me. Let's see.
Nancy, give us a mic check again, please.
Test 1, 2, 3. My Instagram is She's Up to No Good. She's Up to No Good on Instagram. Test 1, 2, 3. My Instagram is She's Up to No Good. She's Up to No Good on Instagram. Test 1, 2, 3. My Instagram is She's Up. Oh, I don't think I can hear you now. I think you're muted on my end. Oh, there you go.
Okay, can you hear us, Nancy?
Yes. I don't think I can hear you now. I think you're muted on my end.
A bit of a delay.
Let's try now.
I don't think I can hear you now. I think you're muted on my end. Oh, there you go.
Okay, Nancy, let's see if we can hear you now.
All right. Hello, everyone. Amazing. Amazing. All right. Hi, my name is Nancy Nogood. Thank you. Yeah, thank you to Bonnie and thank you to everyone a part of the summit to not only put this together, but to make it virtual. And I'm streaming from Brooklyn, New York, and I am so grateful to be here. Really quickly, I grew up in the American South as well in a very strict Roman Catholic family. And for me, it was a situation where, I grew up in South Carolina and 3% of the population in South Carolina is Catholic. It's like smack in the middle of the Bible Belt. So everyone else is Protestant. And so I grew up in a very tight-knit community, and that provided a very strong sense of community, right? But as I got older and I realized that I was a queer person and that's where my life was headed, I felt like that there was two polarizing parts of me, right? My Catholic identity and my identity as a queer person. And I wanted to become a priest from as young as I was like 8. And so I was like in it. I was in it to be a part of I was studying church doctrine at a young age. I was like in it to be Catholic. It was a whole thing. And it's just funny thinking about it now because my life has changed so much since I realized that if I didn't live my life as a queer person and I didn't, live as fully and as authentically as I could, then, I just wouldn't be, I wouldn't be a full whole person. I would be such a shell of a person. And so, I came out and I lost a lot of that community, that Catholic community. And that was so, I knew it would happen, but I didn't realize how much of it would happen. And so that was the religious trauma for me, was just being kind of severed from this community that I thought was there for me. And drag and coming into drag, finding the community through drag, finding such soul fulfillment through it. And not only that, but we'll talk later, but reaching out to other people and connecting to other people, creating that community, that's what helped me survive and thrive through my trauma. Looking back on it now, especially, I think, I still feel myself to be a spiritual person, but she's on a journey. We're seeing what organized religion looks like, if that. But I know that I am still a spiritual person because of my work in drag. It really shows to me that drag is a spiritual just thing for me to be a part of. So I'm just about to hit 7 years and I absolutely love it.
So much drag is spiritual. There's some clap, is that a word? There's some clapping and some appreciation of what you said, Nancy. We had a little trouble hearing all of what you said. The fact that you said you were studying breaks or intentional to be breaks, not a fault of time. And just by way of explaining why I'm on this panel, Lonnie asked me to kind of serve as a moderator. For me as a gay kid, the feminine self side of myself was very visible, and I've seen dangers.
And the side of condemnation for me was the church. And I grew up with that shame my entire life. And surviving drag is a way to emancipate myself from that. And to let, I used to say to let her come out a little bit, but what I'm discovering more and more is the closer that I and she become the more whole that I am. And for me, that is very spiritual. And so to Nancy's point about that drag being spiritual, I just want to push this back to each one of you, and we'll start with Nancy. You said your intention was to be a priest.
Do you view yourself as a priest of sorts now? And how is drag spiritual practice for you? Or is it, you know, we're familiar with meditation and prayer and other forms of meditation. Is drag a spiritual practice for you? Nancy, let's start with you.
You know, that's the funniest thing is that for me.
Hear her in the house. Hang on a second, Nancy.
Oh, of course.
That's the funniest thing.
Here we go.
Is that for me.
Awesome. So for me, that's the funniest thing about just this whole thing about being in drag is that I think about it like, you know, I'm not necessarily a quote unquote priest by, you know, conventional standards, but I have a brunch gig every single Sunday and I wear really fabulous outfits and I stand in front of a crowd of people every single Sunday. And they, you know, I know many of my queer friends who come to that show and they're like, that's church for me. And that's like there's such a fellowship to that, and there's such a community to that I really try not to take for granted, and I try to really hold on to as much as I possibly can. So in that respect, I think it's wonderful, and I think there is a priest-like quality to what I do. On that note, as a spiritual practice, I agree. It's incredibly meditative, right? I mean, you're spending at minimum an hour in a chair, putting a face on, and there's something so meditative to that. And I love talking to other drag performers and asking, you know, what part of the whole getting ready do you feel yourself kind of fall into that drag character? And there's something kind of spiritual about releasing into that. And so it's always interesting to talk to other drag performers and see how that affects them and where that hits. I think those are the most spiritual parts of what I do, and that meditative part, and absolutely that that community and that fellowship.
For me, it's all about connectivity, and like I said before, it was like when I performed it, I was feeling a point on a different plane, a different level, and connected to people in a such spiritual way through song and through music, and sometimes through comedy too. It's a way that I can just help people have a good time. You know, get rid of those 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, or personal or issues that they may have right now. Let's just have this moment together in time. And let's just not think about that. Let's just think about this moment in time and enjoy it. And that's something I love to be able to bring to people.
Well, Paulo, you talked about working in the bars as an underage person, so you've been around drag a lot. Is drag for you a spiritual thing like Nancy was talking about, where you come to church?
During my time of going, I went away from drag for over 30 years while I was going through all of the spiritual trauma I went through. For me, because drag is neither here nor there, it's neither feminine or masculine. It travels in between, and that to me is spiritual. So anything that is in between the spaces, drag allows us, again, because it's collective, for us to be together, for us to be powerful, take back the power from those things that have told us that we're no good, that we're not included, that we're not loved. Drag, while the performance is going on, they are on the stage of life, and we're on the stage with them. And so for me, that helps take me to another level of life, and at that moment in something inside me, and not only me but for other people. When you're laughing together, when you're snapping your fingers, giving $1 or $2, those things are spiritual. Those things are like church. Those things are church.
It feels like worship in a sense, and talking about how we are encountering the divine in those in-between spaces, and that's also giving permission, as I want us to talk about in a minute, for the folks in the room to experience that as well. One of the questions I would like to consider is kind of a cyclical question. How does drag influence your spirituality, and does your spirituality influence your drag? Let's think about that for a moment. Does your spirituality influence your drag, and how does drag influence your spirituality?
Well, I'll say for me, it affects it in a way of how I want to present myself. And the reason I say that is how I present myself in everyday life, outside of drag as well. Because my thing is, I'm still a person, and I'm still like, I'm an artist, but I'm also still gotta do the normal things, like gotta pay bills, gotta go to work, like these things. So that, but drag helps me to be more confident because I was a very quiet child. I didn't really talk a lot, I didn't speak a lot. And I would say drag has helped me to come out of my shell and be my true authentic self in and out of drag. And the spirituality moment has helped me to be able to connect with people. And I've always wanted to help people. That's how I started drag initially, like when I created Coco's, because I started this show with Ashley Morgan at the Hall, doing charity shows. And over my time there, of over 10 years, we raised over $10,000 for different LGBTQ organizations. And I'm happy that I was able to do that, because as an actor and performer and artist, I was like, I don't know how to get back. What will I move? And that was a way that I could utilize my drag and also like do something different. That's like, you don't have to always do the Beyonce. You don't always have to do this. You can do something that's different and really connect with people and help people. And that's what I absolutely love to do.
What about you, Nancy?
So for me, I think drag influences my spirituality because drag has helped me become, it's similar to Coco, drag has helped me become such a confident person in who I am. Drag has helped me understand and realize my identity as a gender fluid person, and really understand the fullness and wholeness of myself. And I think understanding the fullness and wholeness of oneself includes embracing the spiritual part of us. And I think that there is a very like, there is a sense of joy and confidence I have in myself that's like, you know, soul level, right? And I get that, and I feel that because of drag, and I feel that because of being able to create what I want to create and be the person I want to be, and show people that they can also be the person that they want to be. I think my spirituality has influenced my drag because my spirituality, as a spiritual person, I always try to be humble, which is very funny for a drag queen, but I not to be a humble person, but I think that there's a sense of humility because that I try to keep as drag or as humans. I think there's a sense of humility just across the board because you know, when it comes down to it, we're all human beings on this spinning rock forever. So thinking about the humility of it all and how, as a drag artist, I am a face for my community. And I mean, very similar to what Coco was saying about raising money for those in need. I mean, I think that knowing that I'm a face for my community and I need to help my community and have that as in a with a sense of humility, I think is important. And And that's definitely influenced by my spirituality.
Very priest-like.
Thank you.
Response to that?
Yes, I did. You can't cover up ugly with makeup, right? When I see Coco out at the bars where she's not performing and just walking through the crowd, something inside of her exudes. And again, that's beyond the makeup. You can tell that there's work that has been done in her. And even if she's not humble and she comes out and is fabulous, the look that she gives to the others and to us, we then feel fabulous, lifts us up into another place. And someone that does not have spiritual practices that they do doesn't have that.
Amen. In my day-to-day life, I'm an ordained pastor in the United Church of Christ. That those tasks, those are my job. Those are the things that I'm supposed to do. Drag queens, drag performers, drag kings, they are the priests and priestesses of our community in ways because so many of us haven't had access to those folks otherwise. So,
and I say as a pastor, I have my words that I use, and sometimes the way I'm on at the pulpit, but you can use your body, your voice. There's so much, your whole being. And for me as a Christian, that embodies a Trinity, that embodies a 3-in-1. And that is something I can't do as a pastor that a drag queen absolutely embodies.
or maybe we just need more drag queens in our churches. Maybe
Oh,
so.
hey, there it is.
So I just want to remind the folks joining online, please, if you have questions or comments, please type those in so that we can see them and respond to them. Also, it sounds like Bonnie Violet mentioned we were going to have some growing pains. It sounds like our AV team has worked through some of those. Could we appreciate our AV team for making sure
Give it up, AV.
our folks can join this summit virtually. So we've talked already about how you individually have experienced some liberation from this spiritual trauma that has been inflicted, I guess, unanimously among each one of us. And we talked a little bit about the permission that what we do gives to others. Could we talk a little bit together about how the practice of drag, actually as a spiritual practice, you talk about how it really has helped emancipate or liberate you as a spiritual person, and more specifically, your understanding of your vocation, ministry as a drag queen, and how that is healing the folks in the room.
I can
Go for it,
definitely
Pablo.
speak to this. Now I'm gonna get real Latino here. There's I love mole. It's this thing that goes over chicken. It's a sauce, but it has like 1,000 ingredients in it. To me, when you are at a drag show, it's like a storytelling event. The song is a story. The people listening are part of this story, each of them bringing an ingredient into this mole, into this pot. And that is why I think that it becomes such a spiritual act for everyone around us, because you never know what the person is feeling. I might be down that day. You play that song, but again, because your spirit is exuding to the people that are watching, we are creating together the best mole. And the ingredients change every time. They might be a dark chocolate instead of a milk chocolate, but the mole is still delicious.
Mole is still delicious. How about that as a tagline for
I need that on a t-shirt right there. Mole is still delicious.
Nancy, you got a response to this?
Yes. So you asked that question. I think of two things, or two specific moments. One is, so I've in my work as a drag artist and as a theater maker, I've written a originally was supposed to be a one-woman drag show and has turned into, like all drag things, it just keeps growing, and it's a small drag musical that I've written that uses a lot of my memories of growing up with religious trauma and that sever of community. Anyway, so I have written this show and I've performed it twice now, in Detroit and in New York. And when I've performed it both times, I've changed the ending a little bit both times because I'm not satisfied with it. And when I've done this show, both times people have come out of the woodwork in the audience and have come to me, and so many people have been like, I was raised Catholic, and you know, this is my experience, and to share in what their experience was, and to hear their own story, it's helped me figure out what the ending of my show looks like in a fun way. And so that idea of coming together with community, it's just so absolutely important to me, and I think that's been such a big part. Oh no, I'm trying to remember the second thing. I'm gonna pass it to Coco, and when I remember, I will say something.
No, so I just kind of want to go back to a moment where it was like, for me, it was about connecting with people and also giving joy to them. So when I was doing the Studio 54 show, this gentleman came up to me and after the show and said, "Hey, you just brought such good memories of my friends and the times that we had together." And it was in that moment I knew that I could touch people in a way that Raymond, my boy Nate, couldn't. I was like, oh, I have something special now. I can reach the people that give them such joy, such energy that I didn't know I could do before, or didn't know how to do before. And that's what I try to do with every number that I pick. I try to plan out how can I make this as memorable and effective to people, and how can I make it a truly enjoyable experience that they will come back and be like, wow, that was so much fun. I didn't think about my job. I didn't think about, my parents being sick. I didn't think about all the things that are weighing me down. I just enjoyed that moment in time. And I think we need a lot more of that.
That's absolutely right. I appreciate many of the things about a traditional worship service, many of the ancient practices, many of the things that gives meaning. And as a faith leader, wow, I wish the energy in the room could be like after a drag show. The healing in the room could be like after a drag show. The way we engage our bodies in physical ways, not just the performers, but people in the audience, and we're singing together and we're so joyful. Those are the kinds of things that I wish that the church could figure out. And again, maybe more drag queens behind the pulpit. Another thing I'm thinking is walking around in the Castro. I don't know if this is your experience in my everyday self. There's not a lot of eye contact, and I've got a theory that, especially among the younger generation, I happen to be in the older generation, that there's well, if I look at you, then that means I'm interested or whatever. And so there's this we look down and we're in our phones, not paying attention to each other. When I walk out in the Castro like this, everybody's looking, and I don't even have to speak to people, but people smile and I smile back at them. Just that simple spiritual practice of seeing someone and being seen is liberative. So any of you others want to share experiences from your own practice of drag where you've experienced liberation yourself or in the crowd? Nancy?
Yes. So this makes more sense with this question. I was going to say it earlier. So during the pandemic, when everything was on Zoom, I was asked to be a part or to attend a mass for a Reformed Catholic church. And it was a very new experience for me. I had never, long story short, there's a lot of different rites of the Catholic Church, but the biggest one is the Roman Catholic rite, for anyone who isn't familiar. And that's what you traditionally know as Catholic. And I didn't know about other rites or these kind of Reformed churches that have women priests around the country. And anyway, so I was asked to attend one during Pride Month in 2020. And I attended it and I was very excited. And leading up to it, my friend who was helped setting it up asked me to read the gospel in full drag. And I I said yes, and I did, and I like was trying to keep it together, and then like after the mass, I was just like sobbing because it was just such a unexpectedly healing experience for me, and in some ways it felt just like I was performing a drag number, right? Because I was in front of a group of people, and I was over Zoom, but I was in front of a group of people, and I was um proclaiming joy and good energy, and so many things that can come out of a gospel reading. And so but then in this turn, it was a gospel reading, and it was such a like radical experience that I had never had before. And I always think back to that, and to that church that welcomed me in. And what you were saying, I was like, there needs to be more of this, and more churches that are so open and accepting to what joy and what kind of soul fulfillment drag can bring to people. And it was just outrageously wonderful.
Keep you there, Nancy. Thank you for sharing the depth of that personal experience. And I wonder how many of us in the room watched drag during the pandemic, and how drag queens kept many of us going by being present to us. So thank you, Nancy, for the ways that you showed up and the others of you showed up. And this has made me think of a question I think that Nancy suggested that we talk about today. Why are people in our culture, many people in our culture, afraid of drag, of this thing that we're doing, particularly religious people? Why are people afraid of this?
I'm going to go into this aspect. So I think why people are afraid is because they don't know fully what it is to be a drag queen or know a drag queen. And there's this whole thing of like, if people fear it, then they're like, oh my God, I gotta get away from it. And unfortunately, that's our society of how if we don't know something, we fear it. And I think that's why I love doing Drag Queen Story Hour, because it brings a lot of kids to meet drag queens, and we read stories. And when I do it, we do like little games, and there's songs, and we're dancing. And it's breaking that bridge of I was never exposed to this. So now you are exposed to it, and you shouldn't be afraid of it, because they're just like you. They just have different makeup on. That's it. And that's what I love about that. And if we do that a lot more, especially at a young age, because when we're young, we're sponges. We're absorbing everything. We want to know everything. It's like the knowledge that we're seeking it. And as we get older, sometimes we're not as sponge-like. But that's what I think we need to do more of. Like let's encourage people to meet different walks of life, so that way they are more of a rounded individual, and then they can continue to share their knowledge with others, and it just becomes like a snowball effect. The more that you know, the more you'll share. The more you share, the more you'll know.
Nancy, Pablo, I'm going to respond. Why are people afraid of drag, especially religious people? Giving some religious people. What's in this room?
Why are people afraid of drag? I mean, it's that fear. I couldn't agree more with Coco and that end. It is truly a fear that they have, and a fear because of a preconceived notion, because of they don't know any better. Like I've said this before to people when I grew up in religion, and I didn't have the words that I was a queer person, not only because, it was maybe a different time and the language wasn't there yet, but because in religion, I didn't know. I knew shame, I knew sin, I didn't know queer, and so I think people are missing the opportunities, and that's why we have things like Drag Queen Story Hour. People need to see. Isn't it like there's an irony to it, right? That I feel like such a religious, or very at least Christian kind of ideology is like, don't judge a book by its cover and know the person for who they are. And like, but you don't do that to drag performers, right? You don't do that to queer people. You're just going off what you see on what a news station wants to show you about a pride parade. You're not even at the pride parade. I feel like there's such a surface level, like, I'm going to brush this off that happens with people, and it creates anger and hatred. And I think a lot of that stems out of fear ultimately.
Yeah, well, Pablo, for me, when the drag queen manifests or represents all these isms or things that people have, like homophobia, transphobia, misogyny, is all represented in one spot. Then Christians then use the fear, all of those fears, and find something that attaches it, because the Bible can tell you anything you want it to tell you. And so in the Bible, they find that it tells them that to make the circle smaller, because it says it in Halsted that once, turn your back. They get angry because they're feeling that phobia inside of them and don't know how to figure it out. And again, that is why it is good to take children. Then children will not have that fear when they see a drag queen that manifests the divine, like we manifest the divine as well.
Yes. I wonder what would have happened in my life if the little gay me had been welcomed, not just in society around me, but in my church. How would that, because that we give that such power over our lives, how would that have changed our lives? I've practiced the Christian faith, and in the Christian tradition, Jesus says something to the effect of whoever welcomes the least of these, the children welcomes me. And if our churches practice, and I say this to any religious folks, faith leaders who may be listening to this, if we welcome the drag queen, not that they're the least, they are some of the fiercest and most fabulous among us, but if we welcomed them, what would that say to our children? That's why we need Drag Queen Story Hour, Drag Performer Story Hour. That's why we need those folks behind our pulpits, because that freedom that we're expressing is manifesting out. So thanks for such thoughtful responses. I don't see questions in the chat. I want to shout out to Pan and Siri. Siri says they love this and we love you. I thought I would ask if anyone in the audience here has a question. There's a mic set up right over there. If you have a question or a comment that you'd like to share with us, we would love to hear from you. All right, come on up. Just a second. There's someone coming here to help you to your left. There we go.
Hi everybody, my name is Octavio, and I'm a performance artist, healer, and part-time witch, and I'm very, very excited about this conversation on so many levels. I can't even begin to speak about it, because what I believe is happening with like that fear is the commercialization of drag in the last, I want to say 10 years, and God bless RuPaul and what she's done for the movement, but that idea of competition and that nature of like that's become drag as a sport, that's kind of driven it into a, like, I don't know, that's where I feel there's like this confusion about what drag is. And I as a performer and working with drag performers my whole life, I don't know if this is the standard procedure of dragdom, or is it always spiritual? Where are the entry points? How do we, the mothers, are they all coming from, the drag mothers, are they all coming from this spiritual space? Is this just a subsect of the subsect? It's very, very confusing and exciting. And as representatives of freedom, as you said, the drag is freedom. And that's just a whole new opening for me. Yeah. So I'm grateful for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Octavio. Yeah, I think what drag, a thing drag has taught us is we can do what we want. We can learn to express ourselves as we want in new ways. And so RuPaul found a path
Bonnie Violet has found a path to kind of bring it back to out of competition, but into, let's talk about the spirituality of this. I have seen drag queens in communities, and I bet you have too, and feel free to share, pivot from this. I've seen how drag queens take care of the community, how after the show, they're present in and out of makeup with the community, holding space. So it is spiritual, and there are, I think, many paths. What responses to what Octavio has said do you all have? Nancy, go ahead.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so in my experience, I'm interested to hear Coco's as well. In my experience with drag, I feel like, and also coming from the South too, where, you know, when I first started seeing drag shows and kind of like the pre-Drag Race era, it was only pageant drag, right? And that was like, that's what you saw. And that's still such a large portion, and that's still, you know, something to be revered. But I feel like if you wanted to find any sort of like doors open for you as a drag performer for such a long time, the only route you could go is competition and going into a pageant or entering that cycle or however. And so in that sense, to me, it makes sense why Drag Race is so successful in the mainstream, because it went that route in a way with competition. But one of the good things about it is that it has opened the door for so much more for drag. And so I guess and that's why I'm happy to be a part of this, and I'm so grateful for drag performers like Bonnie who are able to, who see that there is this need to there are other drag performers that want to make spirituality part of the forefront of that other people need to see. And you know, Bonnie was the one who like, let's make this happen, let's put this together. And I think we're going to see more of that. I think we will, and in other avenues and in other ways. And so yeah, I just try to keep hopeful. I think our corrupt capitalist society makes competition at the top, but you know, outside of that, I'm excited to see what happens now that the floodgates can be open, so to speak.
And I want to touch on this. So to me, drag is art, and art is ever changing. And with that is also, there's a freedom there. So that's something that I think that we're starting to see more of. It was always there, but it was just always like underground. And now that we have, it's a double-edged sword with RuPaul. I've always talked about this. So it's like, I'm grateful that drag has been more exposed to people that are in smaller towns and that they never got experiences, but also it highlights only a certain demographic of drag. And I started drag with like drag kings and like the weird out the box drag, like, you know, doing things where you come in there with your face messed up, or they call it skag drag, as some people may know. And I love that drag. I dabble in all of that. I'm also a spooky queen. This is my season, spooky season. So I was the baby first. I was like, should I come? And I was like, no, not today. But I love like different types of drag. Is that like, it inspires me. When I see something like someone living their best life, like, oh my God, I'd love to do this one, I'd love to do that. That inspires me to be like, oh, they did something really cool. There's one person, I just met them last week, Scalia. They did this look where they actually opened their head and they have this brain exposed aspect. It was the coolest thing I had ever seen. And I was like, how do I do that? And that's something as an artist myself, it's like I'm always trying to better myself each time I'm on stage and be better than the previous time. And I wish that we could see more of that in mainstream, because there is a lot of pageantry, as I love pageant, pageantry. But I think that utilizing that was the way to break through the wall for the mainstream world. Now let's show them everything that a drag artist can do.
Yes. So we have a question from the audience. We're going to wrap it up, but we want to respond to this one last question. Pan asks, are there any insights from different religious traditions? And let's focus on the second part of this. Coco, if you have particular experience as a BIPOC person and that intersection added into your interactions, any observations about that?
Yes.
So your practice of Buddhism, maybe you can wrap that into.
Yeah. So I've been studying Buddhism since 2004, and it's hard to be a Black entertainer and saying that I'm an openly gay Buddhist, because a lot of people assume that you are Baptist because you're Black. And I say, well, there are other people like me out there. And the thing that's hard for me is talking to other Black folk, which is something that people don't talk about. Talking to other Black folk about you practicing something different than what the norm is challenging, because there's an off-put feeling that of like, oh, you're not like me, so I don't know how to relate to you. As opposed to having a conversation and saying, hey, oh, so you practice Buddhism? Okay, so how is that different from baptism? How is that different from Catholicism? How is it similar? Because there are a lot more similarities than there are differences. And I just find that sometimes we just have to take the time out to listen to each other. Because that's what I think that's what's missing in our society, is meeting someone that's different from you and listening to their journey and listening to their way of getting to where they got to. I think we need to listen more, because we have 2 ears and 1 mouth. Listen more than you speak.
Right. I think that is a perfect place to wrap up this conversation. I'm going to say thank you to Coco Sho-Nell and to Juan Pablo and to Nancy Nogood for joining this important conversation to kick off the Dragon Spirituality Center. So glad that y'all are here with us. Spiritual care providers will be here throughout the summit to companion you if you need it. And I believe we are done. I'm going to turn it back over to the Radiant and my drag mom, Bonnie Violet.
I'll just talk into this one. All right, for folks who are watching us virtual and for folks who are here in the room, we're going to take about a 15-minute break and get set up for the next panel, which is Kings, Queens, and Things. So please come back in just a moment.
15 minutes.
And for folks who are on live stream, just pop to the next live stream. All right.